All right. Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Draglist Live, where we get the bench race with the world's top drag racers. My name's Bill Pratt. It's great to be with you tonight. Tonight, we're going to feature the great Arnie Klann, who owns two of the most iconic Mopar Pro Stock cars of all time, plus a couple of the NHRA cars that he ran in competition just in the last couple of years. We're going to check in to see how he keeps all these great legendary names alive. Before we bring Arnie in, let's go to John Bockelman and tell you how the chat's going to work. John, how are you, sir?
Doing great here, BP, and howdy from Houston, everybody. Please join us on the live chat. The chat board is on the right side of your YouTube window. Tell us who you are and where you're from. I'll take notes and I'll pass your questions and comments along to BP and Arnie.
All right. Thank you, John. And folks, click the like and share button. Let your friends know that we have Arnie Klann here live. And to prove it, I'm going to bring him in right now. Arnie Klann, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be able to talk with you tonight.
It's so great to talk with you. You raced. Tell us a little bit before we get to the missiles themselves. Tell us a little bit about growing up in northeastern Ohio there, and the race scene that was going on at the time.
Well, it was a blessing from God that I got born there, truthfully, because it became literally I was just in the locus of points of many drag racers that were either well known or up and coming at the time. And so I grew up in Paynesville, Ohio. I was born and raised there, and my grandparents were farmers from Germany and immigrants, as was my dad and mom. And so we had a close community, if you will, a close community of Germans and immigrants and that. Well, it turned out quite a few of those immigrants loved to race. Okay. And so it just turned out where we had a general store where, we'd provide paints and some food and things like that. But a lot of the racers would come into our store and I got to get to know them. I was young at the time, 7, 8, 9 years old. These guys would be coming in and talking about racing. Well, come to find out, one of the racers that was a family that was in the close where I could actually walk to their place in their house and look at the race car. And that just fascinated me to no end. And they eventually took me for the first time out to Thompson Drag Raceway, which was the closest racetrack to where my abode was. And I got to see these cars run. And I was just captured, just absolutely captured by drag racing, and so and around the area, there's some names that were pretty famous, like Spanky Spangler. He ran an A-gas Challenger, and he and his family would sometimes come into our store, and I get to bench race with them, so to speak, as I got older and understood this more. And of course, there was Jim Walther with the special edition Top Fuel car. I used to, as I got older and I bought my Roadrunner, my Hemi Roadrunner, I'd buy speed parts from his speed shop that he had. And there was other people. There was another gentleman down Madison Avenue, which was the main drag in where we were, that had a Top Fuel car. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful green Top Fuel car. And he'd come into the store and I talked with him and my dad, and got to be pretty good friends and all. And then there was a couple other guys that had various cars, and one guy had a super stock car, one of the original LO, what were they, 23 cars, that was a Dodge Barracuda. And so, or Plymouth Barracuda. And so anyway, so I'd hang around him, and so I really got this bug about racing. And of course, and being of my heritage, my family did not believe it was good to be in bed after 5:30 in the morning. You had to be up and working. Okay, and so that work ethic was instilled in me. And fortunately, I was able to make enough money over a period of time, and with my parents contributing, to buy a 1969 Hemi Roadrunner.
Nice.
And so when I got old enough, I got that car, and first thing I did is I took it down to Thompson and put it on the drag strip to see what I could do. And I realized I was a miserable driver, but I understood the car. And so over a period of time, I got into racing more and more. There was a gentleman by the name of R.L. Bittner that I actually worked for him for a while. He built and rebuilt pipe organs and installed those into the churches and that in the area. And so I made good money, but his brother was a very famous restorer for cars, particularly antique cars like Ferraris and more or less the European car. Well, he got me hooked up with a guy who had a Pro Stock car. It was a 1970 Barracuda, supposedly a Sox and Martin car, though I never saw any evidence of that. But in any event, he couldn't drive the car, and so he let me get into that car, and I drove it for a while.
Wow.
But just in like at Highway 42, and
Sure.
we ventured one time into Pennsylvania with the car, and another time into Michigan. But that was really my first beginnings of getting an appetite for racing.
Was that about 70 or so, or when you had the Pro?
Yeah, 1970 to roughly 73, beginning of 73.
Wow. Can you share what the guy's name was who owned the car?
That I can't, not because I don't want to,
Okay.
but I'm terrible at memory. This getting older is not what it's cracked up to be.
I hear. Well, that's why I have them written down 125,000 entries. That's why I'm trying to scam you for some info there, but we'll get it.
Well, I will get it to you. If I think about it during this broadcast, I'll let you know, or otherwise later on I'll look it up.
Got it.
But he basically just couldn't drive the car, but he was a wealthy man, and so he wanted to see the car run. But his wife had other plans for the money, so that kind of ended his racing career.
Right.
Okay. That's always a problem, isn't it? Any event, so that was that period of time. But I was enamored with the racing at that point, and the first time I saw a Pro Stocker run was again at Thompson Drag Raceway, and there was a lot of local guys that were Pro Stock racers. There was Ron Hutter. He had a Vega. You had Dale Evans. His father had Evans Chevrolet, and he had a Copel, what's called a Copel Camaro, which was a big block. I think it had the L88 in it, and he drag raced that. And that car, honestly, was my favorite car. Not particularly what was on the side of it.
That was my favorite too.
Oh, really? Okay.
I loved it. Yeah. One year he won them all out at Thompson at the match race event, with running 860s or something. This was the mid 70s. I'm like, yeah, that's my guy right there.
Yeah, there you go. Well, what I liked about it is he had Steppenwolf on the hood scoop, on the mailbox, and I loved Steppenwolf at that period of time in my music genres, and that. But then he had like people like Mike Valerio was another Pro Stock racer in that area.
Mr. Acid Dip.
Pardon?
Mr. Acid Dip himself.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so anyway, I was doomed to go Pro Stock racing. Okay. I'd be a much richer man if I didn't do it. But any event.
Well, you got started. Can we check in with the chat and see if folks are out there wanting to ask any questions yet? John, anybody with us yet?
Well, we have people showing up right now. Pete Mariello from Los Angeles says, "Good evening, everybody."
Howdy, Pete.
Kay Thurkelson in Salt Lake City says that she has arrived and she's happy to be here. And we're happy to have you here tonight, Kay. And John Yost says, "You're looking good, Arnie."
No, thank you.
And Rich Panacaro in New Jersey says, "Hey, gang." Let's see if anybody else has showed up yet. No, we don't have any messages outside of the ones I just said. So we're still coming in.
Thank you, John. All right, folks, welcome, and glad to have you with us. So Pro Stock, what was between like 73 to 98 or so? What were you doing in those years?
That's a good question. I had, as I mentioned to you before we got online here, I had my career set by one book when I was about 9 years old, and it was called Tom Swift Jr. and his Flying Fortress. And I knew after reading that book I wanted to be Tom Swift in my life. Okay, now he was a forerunner of Elon Musk, actually. Because as Elon's done everything that Tom Swift was able to do, he made his own rocket ship. Elon's made his own rocket ship, all that stuff. But I always wanted to get into new technology, new exciting things, push the envelope, so to speak. So literally after 1973, I was still in college, and I wrote a paper on how sound travels through water. Okay. And talking about, a whole bunch of detailed stuff. Anyway, that paper, the professor I gave it to edit it for me, he basically showed it to a couple of people, and they offered me a job to go work on some marine projects for the military. And so that kind of changed my trajectory down the pathway that I really wanted to go. And over the years, I was in the oil business, but on a very unique side of it. And that was all frontier exploration, developing new technologies to drill in water, to look for oil and other things, and got involved in search and recovery activities underwater for stuff that the military would lose, all the militaries of the world. And so we'd go, find this stuff, and I developed some of the technologies for doing underwater exploration and that, and got pretty heavily involved in frontier, like I said, frontier exploration for oil, like up in the Beaufort Sea, or I was part of a program management team with a company down in Louisiana, where they put in the largest platform ever at that time, which was called the Cognac platform. It went in 1,000 foot of water depth, and no one had ever done that before. So my whole life was being geared towards technology development and that. But going back to the racing, what really fascinated me was, and what got me to buy the Motown Missile Challenger and then the wire car and that, was the fact that Chrysler, as a company, was very technologically driven. And I was always fascinated by that. And so while I was not racing, because I quite frankly didn't have the budget to do it, and that, I stayed abreast of it, and where I could, worked on developing sensors that we were using on some of the oil stuff could be applied to the cars, and that, and quite a bit of, I learned how to work with, various computer tools and that, and I was helping some of the racers that were located here in Las Vegas with trying to improve their performance. But I never, again, want to get into a car. I was always more interested in the engine development, the building those and that. So anyway, long story short, come about 1995, I had my own company called Arc Energy, and we were developer, owner, and operators of power plants and sold electricity wholesale to utilities, but I used waste fuels to lower the carbon footprint. I was way ahead of this game. Okay. Yeah. 20 years ahead of this whole carbon footprint stuff. And so anyway, my company was very successful, and I had the money now to go do something. And so my wife and I, and we took my two sons. One was 2, and the other one was 3, and the other one was 1. And we went to Pomona in the Winter Nationals, and we're going through the crits, and I'm looking at all these pro stockers and how they had changed and developed the technology and everything like that. And I just had this bug, I just had this desire. And so we were walking around, and I think it was Larry Nance was racing there, and I Larry's from Ohio,
right,
area. And so I was talking with him, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a car for sale, a Pro Stock car. And it was John Collins was the owner of it. And it turned out, though, that it happened to be a Billy the Kid's step car. Okay. It was one of the Avengers that he had Jerry Haas build in 1997. And I was looking at that, and Collins was going to go strictly GM cars. He couldn't figure out how to get the Mopar to run. And he was asking a fair price for it. Okay. It was just a little under 6 figures. And I talked to my wife, and I said, sweetheart, I really want to do this. And so she looked at me askew, and she says, okay, but if you kill yourself, I'm going to be really pissed off. And I said, okay, no problem. I promise not to. And so we ended up buying the car that day. I bought the car, it had a B1 motor in it, had another motor that came with it, a test motor. And literally 2 days later, they delivered the car to my house down in Costa de Casa in California, because we were living in California at that time. And so I get this thing, and that's how I got started back into racing in 1998. Got this car.
Wow. Who was your first driver when you actually, how long did it take you to bring it out, and who did you put behind the wheel?
Well, it took me a while because first of all, it was so different than what I was used to. Okay, I mean, we're talking, basically 20, 25 years later. And so it took me a while to figure out how to even start the car. Okay, truthfully, and then figure out the clutches and everything. But I really wanted to learn. So I tore the car apart and then put it back together several times. And I realized that there was no way I was going to run this car like I did the old cars, and that I'd really need a crew chief. And so I was talking around, and Dave Butner, who had been Mark Powick's crew chief, came on board as our crew chief, and then started talking about driving because it was clear. And this is probably a bad story, but and I don't encourage it, but I wanted to try this car out someplace, and they were building a toll road not too far from where we were living out there in Trabuco Canyon. And so one weekend when no one was working on the road, there was a section of it. We took the car out there, and I did some hits on it on the toll road. I was probably the first person to ever take a Pro Stock car out onto a toll road. And but no, but it wasn't open yet, so I thought it was safe. And it made me realize there was no way I could drive this car until I got some seat time. And so Dave and I talked about it and got Mike Bell to be our driver.
Yeah.
And Mike,
world champion, not bad.
not bad at all. Of course, he lived in the East Coast, in North Carolina. And so anyway, I got a hold of him, talked to him. He was between rides, and so we worked out a deal. And so everything that I had at that point, which was the Avenger, some other motors, and that went back to his shop. And we started racing. The first race that he drove that car in was the Winter Nationals in '99. It was
Wow.
And we didn't qualify, which was okay. But I learned a lot about running that car that time, and test sessions beforehand. Mike's a great driver. Dave Butner was a fantastic crew chief, and we had some other people that joined us, as part of the crew on and off. And so really that first year as we were racing, and I ended up buying 2 Dodge Avengers. I had the one that I bought from Collins, which was Billy the Kid's step car, which was an amazing piece of workmanship. It was a lot of titanium and everything. And then I bought a Bickle car because Mike liked the Bickle cars. And so the Dodge boys were falling apart at that point. Dale Icke, was running the team, but in '99, David Nickens took over the Dodge boys for Chrysler, for Dodge, basically. And so one of the Bickle cars became available, so I bought that. And so we painted them up, and we ran those 2 cars that year.
Right. That's awesome. I remember all of these, but you don't know all the details. We list the driver, we list the owner if we can find him. We list the crew chief, which is all often very hard to find. But you don't really know who really owns them, and it's fascinating. I do remember when the Dodge deal went away from the Dodge guys and transferred. So we're in the late '90s and pushing the early soon, right?
Yeah, and so it became an interesting progression of learning how to run the cars, and like I said, along the way, found some people that because again, I was looking at this and I said, okay, we dynoed this engine and another one, and I decided to go do a lease program. So we got into the lease program with Dale Icke. He was again running the Dodge Boy cars. He was also doing the motors for Alan Johnson at that time, and for Larry Nance. And so he had a pretty good reputation as an engine builder, but his engines were down in comparison to the DRCE blocks that they were running in the GM cars.
Right.
And so we had to get smart on how to run the car better. And of course, Dave had decades of experience running these types of cars and that. But I ran across a guy in Arizona by the name of Pat Hale. And Pat and I just clicked because he, again, was developing all of these programs to, quantize what the cars were doing and being able to rationalize the data. and particularly because RacePack had come in, with their computerized data acquisition systems and so I thought, oh boy, this is cool. And so I hired Pat to do a lot of work for us. And Pat had a secret program no one knew about, but it was called Goldmine. And Goldmine was a first ever self-learning program for looking at data and then optimizing the data and the points, depending on what your inputs were, for how to set up the car. And so and again, this is more complex than this show probably deserves, but or can warrant. But basically, what it did was taught us over a series of runs what the car liked and what it didn't like, what atmosphere conditions it would run better in versus other atmospheric conditions, and so we could start playing around with jetting, optimization on fuel distribution through the manifold, looking at how the carburetors were performing and what little tweaks in that we needed to do. And so it became, over time, we were more successful than we deserved to be, given the horsepower we had. But it was, and everybody was learning. I mean, it was really good. Well, Mike Bell ended up in 2000 moving on. Okay, he was again working with Roy Hill, with the school,
right.
The Pro Stock school. And so any event, we got another driver, which was ended up getting John Geyer.
Yeah.
And John was a driver like no other also. He was an excellent driver and a lot of fun to be with. Okay, just a lot of fun. And so he drove the car for a couple of years until he got sick. And then we ended up eventually going with Mike Orville. And by far, Mike was the funniest and most fun driver that we ever had. Okay, we got into more trouble than I care to imagine, but we enjoyed it.
When you say you raced both cars with back when the first year or two, was Mike driving both of them? You just used one or the other, or did you have?
Yeah, we just used one or the other to see which one was better. Truthfully, we did kind of an A/B comparison between the cars. And it was interesting because the Bickle car would launch harder, as my recollection was. It would launch better, but aerodynamically, the Haas car was better at the top end. So it was a way Haas hung the body versus the way Bickle did the body and the suspension and all these things. And again, I'm not saying that what I'm telling you is absolutely true. From my observation, it was, but again, bear in mind, we were a young team trying to get going and trying to figure out, at least from my standpoint, how to run a current Pro Stock car.
Right. So fascinating. Did you have the Mopar missile or Motown missile name on it from the beginning?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I talked to Ted Spihar and I looked to see if it was trademarked or anything, and it wasn't. And so I went back to Ted. He said, yeah, if you want to use it, go ahead. And so I trademarked the name. And so when we came out, first race was known as the Motown Missile.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about working with Pat Hale and the basically artificial intelligence, almost self-learning back then, is that you're following in that tradition of the high-tech Motown missile and Mopar missiles, which is just amazing. I definitely want to talk about those cars more. But let's check in with John and see if there's anyone with any questions or comments on the chat. John?
Yes, we've had more people show up. Mark Malinsky is listening from New Jersey. Jack Red is here with us tonight. He says hello all. Yeah. Don Terry Francis says, good evening. First time for me watching on YouTube. I would love to learn about the theory on the cable car. And John Yost said it was called the wire car also. And Rich Panicaro mentioned a guy named Don Grother or Grother.
Grothier, yeah, out of
Grothier, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Grothier, yeah. So what is it about the cable car that I had never heard of this before? So
well, is that the last kind? Because here's what we're going to do, guys. It's so exciting tonight that Arnie is actually going to take us on a shop tour of all of the cars and a lot of the technology tonight. So we're probably going to extend the show a bit. and we've got we're just got a really awesome show lined up for you. So we can talk about, we're going to be talking about all kinds of high tech stuff. John, before we move on, was that the last comment?
Yeah, that was the last post that I see. Let's see. It says here, I asked if Don drove the cable wire car, and John said no, he drove Plymouth's. The wire car is a Duster.
Okay.
That's correct. That's
Well,
correct.
thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Cable was a sponsor of Don Grothier, and it was on the side of his Barracuda and I think of his Duster also. But it was not. It was the car was always called the wire car, and I can explain that a little bit later.
Sounds great. Well, let's go back to the modern NHRA. We'll wrap up that section and then go back in time and then go to high tech. But so eventually, let's see, where were we? We had Corbell driving the car, and then
Corbell drove and through 2008. And, as you recall, there was a tremendous downturn in the economy in 2007, 2008.
I do.
And quite frankly, everybody we had as sponsors, like Tesoro Petroleum was one of our sponsors, and we had several others. They all, said, okay, this is fun, but we got to cut back. And so we found ourselves without any sponsorship support or anything like that. And at that point, with David Nickens doing our engines, and I bought engines for the car, but he was still, refreshing them over periods of time, and that it just got too expensive to race. And there was the NHRA purses were not going to pay for the car, even if you won every one. You're still going into a negative situation. So we stopped racing really in 2008. We did another one, I think, race in 2009, which was kind of just at the request of one of our sponsors. But we were all done all through. Plus, we timed out on our Dodge Neon that we had, the Pro Stock car. But my son, finally, my oldest son, was of age, and so I got him into the car. And so Mike Corvo helped with training him, but Joe Lapone got involved. He was another Pro Stock racer from way back when, with Grumpy Jenkins and that. And so Lapone had mercy on us, so to speak. And so we got Richard licensed in the car. And so Richard has been driving since that time. We don't do many races, mostly PSCA out here on the West Coast. We stayed away from NHRA because don't particularly want to run B altered or some other class like that with the car. And so Richard he came runner up at the PSCA race in 2012 for the finals. And so that was the best he ever ran in the Neon. And at that point in time, I was the crew chief. I was taking care of the engines. I was rebuilding them and all that on my own. And so it was it was one of those fun things. We took the car back out again in 2015 for a couple races, but then we just parked it, and you'll see it tonight when we do the shop walk here. It's still here, and I got some news I'm going to announce tonight about that because we're going to have another driver for it pretty soon. But in any event, that's pretty much it. Okay, we again learned a lot. Spent a lot of money, but had a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you for bringing that name back, because I literally built that. As the model, right? And when that model car came out of the Motown missile, there, I painted it flat black and so kind of a different look. But
no, that's cool. That's cool.
That's where I loved it on the magazines and models for many, many years. And I'm still not a racer. I just love racers, and so. Thanks for keeping it going.
My pleasure.
Well, what do you think? You feel like taking a shop tour and walking us through the history of the Motown and Mopar missiles and some high tech stuff?
Yeah, why not? Well, that'd be fun. Okay. All right. So let me switch his camera around for a moment, and there we go. So, right, what's been sitting behind me is a Hemi motor. And this engine is one of the original Ted Spihar engines that was in the Challenger in 1971. This is serial number 32 of his engines. And this is obviously a 16 plug Hemi engine. It's 396 cubic inches. And again, you notice the fancy distributor drive here. So we could run 16 plug wires at any given time. And I wanted to show you something, because this is, again, part of the technology that you would think didn't work, but it did. This is the front motor mounts, okay? And if you notice, it's just a semicircle here, okay?
Right.
And there's matching landing pads in the engine compartment for those to sit on. And the only thing that holds this engine on in the front is we use two on either side of this, and then there's another one over here that you can see. And what that is we just use hose clamps to hose clamp it to the landing pad. There's no bolts, no nothing that hold this engine in place. But it was enough because of the torque and just the way the car is designed to mount the engine. So this, when they had to move engines out, okay, very quickly, you took four clamps off, you unbolted the transmission from it, so you could pull the clutch and everything out in the bell housing, and you just pulled the engine out, and they could change them out very quickly. So this was one of those things that not a whole lot of engineering went into it. I think more or less good luck, but in any event. But the other thing that
it tried it and it worked.
And it worked, yeah. The other thing, though, that you can't really see too well, but hopefully you can a little bit, is right down in this area, there's two magnetic pickup sensors, one here and one there. And there's a reluctor wheel, which it's got four at 90 degrees, four magnets. And to the best of my knowledge, this was the first engine and the first car to use magnetic pickups to adjust the timing of the engine itself. So you and now this is used in every car known to man, Pro Stock and otherwise. But in 1970, when this system was designed by Arnie Klann, this was the best of the best, because you had infinite control of the timing on the engine itself. Okay, and there's two electric boxes in the car, basically, because you would run it at one position from launch until you got to top end, and then you'd switch to the next position, which would give you higher performance as you're going through the lights.
Wow. And
so it just worked out again, where they were able to squeeze the next oink out of the engine in power for this Hemi. And it also, because of the 16 plug, one of the things Mr. Hoover did, and part of the development of this Hemi engine, is he looked at the clocking of the spark plug. So they would run test after test after test, positioning the spark plug 1 degree each time to see if there was a performance advantage of doing that. And then once they figured out where the best spark plug position was, they do the same thing with the timing, adjusting it in the control box to make sure that they had the best performance coming out of the engine itself.
Arnie, were those done via dyno pulls?
Nope, these were the car running down the track.
Wow.
Mr. Hoover insisted on getting real data, real live data. And actually Warren Johnson, many years ago, I remember hearing him say this. A bunch of us were standing around in the pits, and I was just all ears listening. And he said, I can get so much horsepower on a dyno, but then I put it out on the car and it doesn't do anything, falls flat in his face. He says, the thing is if we were racing dynos, I'd win all the time.
Yeah.
So in any event, so that's part of it. And then, of course, you had the lightweight aluminum valve covers, and this block was heavily machined. I don't know if you can see this very well, but all of this is metal that's been cut out of the block, down here. On the side, if you notice, in this area, this is all smooth. There's no ears on this for mounting the engine. That would have been cast into the block. This is all smooth right in this area. And that they pulled about 45 to 50 pounds off this block, machining it to lighten it. And
Wow.
the freeze plugs are held in by these little plates because the block is so thin they just fall out if you just had the freeze plugs just hammered in there, type
Right.
of thing.
Oh man.
And so so this again is just all part of the technology that was developed in the 1970s. And matter of fact, this block is so thin. Like if you notice right here, this cracked because they took off so much meat off the ear here that this part of the engine stand is held on by this screw going across. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, I know it was effective because this was the quickest and fastest car that year.
Oh, it was. It was. And then this is the real car. Okay.
That's amazing. It's a work of art.
It really is. And what's amazing when you think about it is they were trying to get and this was kind of the theory in those days, is you wanted all the weight you possibly could get off the front end, so the weight transfer would all go to the back. Right. And so they really went all out to lighten this car. And like, I'll give you an example, and this is why it's apart right now, is I'm going to strip paint off of the titanium pieces. But like this rod here is pure titanium. If you put a magnet on it, there's no magnetic attraction to it. It's not steel, it's titanium. These bolts that hold on the K-frame, they're titanium. If you look at this spindle, the spindle might look odd for a Hemi car, and it is because it's off of a 6-cylinder car, okay, Dart, and it's lightweight. I mean, look at the thickness here in the spindle. That is 1 inch. Wow. The bearing is so small, it's unbelievable. Okay. But this is how they got weight off the car. The torsion bars are titanium. They are not magnetic. Wow. Okay. So when I bring the car back out again for the car shows, you're now going to be able to see where they did some of the trick stuff. Okay. On the car. In terms of the setback of the wheels and that, they moved the body around even though it's a unibody, there are some cuts and changes in the chassis itself. So like, let me see if you can see how this was all cut out and then they put the frame in. But here you'll notice there's a cut here, and there's a matching one on the other side where they moved the body around a little bit, and that's where they did it. Okay. Wow. There's one underneath in the back. And Bill, I don't know if I can get this better shot or not, but this whole car was acid dipped. Okay. So like you push on this metal, it flexes. Well, part of this is there's dimples.
Yeah, we can see that now.
Like here, I don't know if you can really see that dimple or not, but there's a big one right here. There's another one that's back in here. And this is when the car would launch. The metal was so thin, even though they had put in a roll cage and stiffeners in the frame itself, that the whole car flexes. And so it took a permanent flex. Mm-hmm. And that's how type of thing. And then in the back, the wheelie bars, they oddly enough ran disc drum brakes, but it's got a Dana 60 in it. Mm-hmm. And the wheelie bars were pretty clever at the time because they were able to allow the car to do the weight transfer, but not slam it so hard that the rear end would bounce. So it had a more effective launch on launching than it would have otherwise.
I always wondered about those types of wheelie bars, which you saw in like this car, the Grumps car, where they came down sort of straight. My question was, how did they get the two sides level? If you were just a couple inches off on one, it seems like it would screw things up. Do you know how they did that?
Well, basically, it's not so much because this car, when it launches, okay, it obviously torques, okay, and it's gonna, because of the way the engine's mounted in that, it's gonna want to lift the left front wheel higher than the right front wheel.
Right.
So to counteract that, inside this tube, right here. See if there you go. Mm-hmm. Inside this tube are literally valve springs.
Right. Okay.
Okay. And what they did is they put in really stiff valve springs in this tube and lighter ones over on the other one.
Got it.
And so you had counteracting force as the car started to rotate, right? And if you can imagine this, so the car is rotating up on the left, and it's hitting this one first, okay, because of just the torquing of the whole chassis and everything. And so this was stronger, and it would basically have the effect of preventing it from torquing too far so that the other one would hit.
Right. That answers my question. It makes so much sense, and I never gave it I never considered that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, believe it or not, we do that still in this car. Okay, this is our latest car, and in this car, again, suspension is obviously different. We have much longer wheelie bars on the back end of this thing now, but we also do the same thing on the wheelie bars here. We preload the right wheelie bar in comparison to the left one for that whole torquing of the car that they try to solve here on the Challenger. But we also do something else, is we stiffen the shock on the right side of the car slightly more than the one on the left. And so again, the shock absorbers are designed to basically try to keep the car level. And then the rebound on the springs, which are, they're coil over Coney shocks that we use, at least, the spring rates, depending on how you want the car to hit and where your wheel, basically your four-link is set up and all that. What you want the car to do is not pull the front end up. You want the car to sit and go straight. And so that's playing around with the shocks, with the spring rates themselves, and then the weight transfer. But the goal is to get, the full weight of the car on the rear end as much as you can on launch. And so we typically achieve about 2,180 to 2,200 pounds on the rear slicks with the way it's set up. So you still got about 100 pounds hanging in the front and that. So, but this car is our latest and greatest, and it will be running again this year.
That's amazing.
And that. Then I'm gonna come over here and basically show you. These are two fresh Pro 499 engines that are for the Neon itself, and the one on the right is about 1,300 horsepower and around 810 foot-pounds of torque. And this engine on the left is a killer engine. It's been dynoed. It's right at about 1,365 and about 870 foot-pounds of torque. So this is the best engine we have, or that I have right at the present time. And again, these are 499. They're legal Pro Stock motors, but they haven't been run yet. Okay, and so my goal is to run them this year, and just see what these engines really have in that. And so everything down here for running the cars, the rear ends and all that are here too. So,
Arnie, so what category do you race when you race now with a PSCA? Do they have a Pro Stock type, a naturally aspirated class?
No, actually, if you notice on the back of the car, there's an X through the Pro 84 on the rear window. And we were running the 10.5 class. So we literally, instead of having the big, slicks that were the 16 or 17 inch, we run literally 10.5 inch width tires. And what we found out, and I was talking to Larry Morgan about it, and he was fascinated, is the 10.5 tires hit harder and we get better traction on them than we do on the bigger ones on launch.
I've heard
the difference is the 10.5s don't grow as much in the top end, so your speed falls off, but you have a much harder launch. And it just amazed the heck out of us that we would have that. So
that's crazy. Do you line up against blown and supercharged cars or nitrous cars?
You can, yeah. You can find that. When Richard did runner up at the finals for PSCA, he came in second. We were the only carbureted engined car in that whole class, the 10.5 class. And the guy we beat was one that was turbocharged.
Wow.
Or excuse me, supercharged. And his car would run consistent 630s. Here in Las Vegas. Our car, the best we could get it down the track here in Vegas was about 668 to 670. And yet we beat them because of the fact that God's hand was on us, or we got a favorable wind or something. But we did beat them. Yeah. Well, Richard is an excellent driver. he gets consistent on the lights, and he doesn't vary much. And actually, so he's a good driver and all that. But that was really the last major race we went to. And what we're going to do this year with this car to test those motors and some other stuff, and to get a baseline. Not that we're going to go back running anymore, but this is kind of like, I don't want to say the final hurrah, but it's close to it. As I'm going to get licensed again in Pro Stock. I'm going to get my license. So I'm going to run this thing to qualify and get my license. And then I have to do a couple races. And so I'll race those races and that.
Fantastic.
So that's my goal.
So that's a scoop here, guys. At least
yeah.
a scoop
for
us.
Well, I'm turning 73 in October, and I figure, for my 73 birthday, I'm going to gift myself that.
That's awesome.
And so, Bill, I don't know if you want to ask John if anyone else has got any questions or whatever. I'm going to go real quick here through intake manifolds for a moment.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that the Motown Missile, the original one, was it had its own data acquisition system, and it was the only car across all the spectrum of racing that actually had a data acquisition system in the car. Now, it was rudimentary by any stretch of the imagination, but it gave enough data that they could really see what was going on in the car. And they measured basically wheel speed, rear wheel speed, front wheel speed. They measured clutch slip, which was huge in those days to even think about measuring it. And they measured some other things, the position of the body in relationship during launch and how it settled out in that. And one of the reasons why they did that is Chrysler had its own space group that was in Alabama, Birmingham, or not Birmingham, I forget where. Anyway, and so they used literally equipment that was part of the Apollo program that went into this car to do the data acquisition. Okay, and so this kind of gets into that again, that technology. Chrysler and Dodge Performance was way ahead of the time of all the racers. Okay, and this was key because this car became the platform for all the other racers to be successful. This car was never, if it won a race, that was great. If it didn't win a race, it still was great, because just like Elon Musk, going back to him, any crash is good. Because I get data. Okay, in this car, any time down the track, you get data, and that's what Mr. Hoover and the whole team at Mopar Performance was looking at, to how to improve the performance of the other Pro Stock cars, whether it was Sox and Martin, Dick Landy, any of the other guys that were out there. Well, one of the things they wanted to do was, and the reason why the car was started is there was a decision made that they wanted to develop an automatic transmission for the Pro Stock car so they could get more buyers into racing. And so one of the very first tunnel ram manifolds they used was this thing. And this is an actual manifold from the car back in the day, where they had the runners. But if you notice, the carburetor bolted right to the tops of the runners. And the reason why they did that was they believed that the carburetor would act like fuel injection. So each cylinder would have its own if you will, injector port. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. It turned out that they discovered pretty quickly that this type of manifold worked okay with the automatic cars. But as soon as you tried to translate this to a 4-speed car, it fell on its face. And the main reason why it fell on its face is there was no plenum. And so there was no cross, if you will, supercharging between the exhaust valves closing and the intake valves closing, because there is a pressure differential that happens within the engine. Now, they didn't realize it right away, but they figured it out pretty quickly. And so they went to this type, and this is Wien. And the first versions of this, they had Wien cast these. This is magnesium. This thing weighs about 10 pounds.
Wow.
Very, very light. But this has the plenum. Okay, so this plenum connects to this back and to the front. And so as valve timing, they could play with valve timing on the cams and get basically a supercharging effect as say this valve, number 5 cylinder would close my mind just went blank on the sequence, but so let's say number 3 opens. The closing of the valve causes reversion coming up the runner, and forces more fuel to go down this runner because that's where the low pressure area is. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating.
Okay. And so they played with that, and there's many types of different tops of this thing. But this was kind of the standardized version that went out for the Mopar cars. Now this one, and this goes back to the gentleman who asked about the wire car. This is one of the intake manifolds from the wire car from way back when. And again, this was part of the evolution of the plenum. So like if you look at this one, I don't know if you can see it very well because it's dark, but it's pretty shallow. Okay. Yeah. The plenum before it goes to the runner. Look at the depth of this plenum. It's almost about double what this one is. Okay. Right. And this was for the small block because the small block was going to turn much higher RPMs than the big block was. And it needed more air. And so you had more air coming in from the carburetor. And then the reversion effects would help in supercharging the engine to get better performance out of it. And to give you an example, here's one of the current ones that we use now. And look at how big the plenum is on that. I mean, this thing is monstrous.
Way down.
Okay. And we do, tricks like directing the fuel, which way we want it to go, coming down out of the carburetors. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
Yeah. And that, but again, now this one has a shorter runner. And the shorter runner gives you less torque, but it gives you more RPM and it gives you more horsepower on the top end. These were longer runners, so you got more torque out of them, and reasonable response on the top end from a high performance standpoint.
Yeah, unbelievable! Wow.
Okay.
Where are you going to get this, folks? That's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, kind of going back to the question about the wire car. The reason why it was called the wire car was that car was constructed, and that was really the last one where the whole performance team from Dodge was involved, or Chrysler. And they designed that car like a Formula One car of its era, in which you had a chassis with the monocoque, if you will, which was the main part of the body. And then you had everything bolted to that. And so as an example, in the wire car, if you look at the way that car is constructed, it has a front engine plate, motor plate, that bolts to the front of the chassis. But the chassis is just 4 tubes sticking out in air. Okay. And on that motor plate, you have the motor, but you also have all the steering. You have all the suspension attached to that motor plate. Okay. And that's the way they designed the Formula One cars. So you had you took the engine out and the whole front end of the car was gone. Okay. Suspension, everything. In the rear end, you had again, very similar. You took the rear end out and everything was gone. Okay. The rest of the support and all that came, basically through the suspension components. In the middle, you had a motor plate that was what's called the mid plate, and we have those today in the current cars. You had a mid plate that basically created the rigidity, from a torsional standpoint of the car, so it wouldn't twist itself up. Because if the car was just sitting there without that mid plate, as soon as you drop the clutch, you would have literally torqued the main part of the monocoque portion of the car. The same way with the Lenco. That has a Lenco, and there's a plate at the end, the tail shaft of the Lenco, that ties between the two chassis bars that it sits between to create torsional rigidity in the monocoque. So the whole car is, if you take everything out of it, 2 guys can pick up that car, and you can actually sort of twist it. You got to be big guys, but you can do it. Okay. What? And so the wires were used because there is no chassis beyond the center line of the rear end housing. And all the metal is acid dipped. And so the fear was that there'd be such a torsional problem going on in the rear end of the car that the rear end would be twisting up. And so they literally used post-tensioned cables between mounting points at the very end of the trunk itself, where the gas tank was, and those went up to the top of the roll cage inside, and then you just tighten those wires up, until it was fairly rigid or to a certain level. We never figured out what the calculated number was, but we're not running the car either, so we're not too worried about it. But that was the whole idea behind that car. I mean, when you look at it from a engineering standpoint, and the technology that was applied, it was huge. It was absolutely huge in terms of being advanced for a car that was going to run in 1974. This was beyond the imagination of anybody else. And even though there was two frame cars out there, this was the next level. Plus, the other thing that, again, Chrysler, Aerospace had, NASA's for their Redstone rocket or their Mercury rockets. And this is a little tidbit. When Alan Shepard made a first sojourn into space, it was on a Chrysler built rocket.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Little useless tidbits, wow. But so, they were some smart people in those days.
Arnie, can I ask you a question about? I always assumed and never knew, never asked. I always assumed that the wires could be adjusted to sort of tune, or was that a thought at all, or were they just simply there to keep the darn thing together as it went down the track?
Let me think about that for a moment. I don't know that you'd get tuning out of it so much as you'd get less vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so with the less vibration in the rear of the car bouncing around, you'd have better aerodynamic flow around the rear end of the car.
Right.
Because the last thing you want to do is have the rear end of the body moving about as you're going down the track.
Right.
Okay, and because it disturbs the airflow, and as the airflow gets disturbed, it will, if it's violent enough, it will change the driving characteristics of the vehicle itself.
Right. Amazing stuff. Can we check in with John? That's and we'll find out. I'll bet that blew the guy's mind, whoever asked the question. But John, does anyone else have any follow-ups or questions or comments?
Yes, sir. My mind is completely blown. I have really enjoyed this interview. Your two hot rods are two of the most beautiful hot rods I've ever seen, and your explanation of the engine components and everything that you showed us, it just absolutely knocked me over. Wayne Milley is here. He says, "Good evening, gentlemen, the week of the big go." And he said that when you were talking about the Hemi, he said that's extra large history right there.
Wayne, Arnie, I don't know if you know Wayne, he owns a couple of the Grumpy's toys.
I do. I've actually, I think, met him once before. And then I'm trying to remember where, but yeah, I know he has the Grumpy's toys.
Cool.
Him and Mark Pappas and a few others.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
John Yost said that Arnie is a great guy and Joe Pappas is the same. They're both class acts. And Jordan Wick, using Jordan Wick's handle, he said, "Hi, Arnie, from Jeff Wick and family. Hi, Bill and JB as well."
Hi, Jordan. How's it going, buddy?
Well, Jeff, I'm glad to hear from you. I'm glad you're still alive and your family's doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's been many, many years. Actually, Jeff bought the Bickle car from me.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So now I've seen that car. Right. I understand. That's interesting.
Yeah, great. Jeff's a great guy, and his family, I love them. They're good people.
Die-hard Mopar Pro Stock guys fighting the good fight.
Yeah. Bill, if I can interject one thing, because John made a good comment. Actually, the wire car is not here in Nevada. Okay, it's actually sitting in Howell, Michigan, at Joe Pappas's shop. Okay, and we kind of divided the cars up because people on the West Coast wanted to see the cars, people on the Midwest, East Coast wanted to see it, and so we left the wire car and its trailer and its support, functions and all that in Howell, and so Joe. Like he took it to the Mopar Nats here a couple of weeks ago, and that car gets showed there. I'm showing this car, the Challenger, out here on the west side.
Awesome.
So, but Joe was one of the original fabricators on this car, or not this car, but on the wire car. He worked on it with Don Carlton, because he worked for Don Carlton for a number of years.
Got it. Yeah, those are. I was fascinated, and I know we're chatting on. Got a couple folks to I think still contribute on the chat, but I was fascinated to know, and I think you took me way back 50 years, is that the Carlton car was a test mule, right? It was out there to, to try things, for the big name guys who were in the points. And of course, I know there's one race where there's a big controversy between Ronnie Sachs and Don Carlton, where either Carlton won and shouldn't have or something. I cannot remember the details of it, but
well, I can tell you a little bit about that. Joe Pappas tells the story much better than I can, but yeah, Don beat the pants off of Ronnie. Okay, and what ended up happening was he didn't even go over he went over the scale, got the car weighed, drove it back to the pits, and they had already set it up to drive the car right into the transporter. So they weren't going to park it and winch it up or anything. Donnie drove it up there. They put the truck was already packed, and they just left the track with the car. Okay, now there's a whole big story behind that is probably best told by Joe Pappas.
Got it. Thanks. John, anybody else with thoughts? John, do we have anything else on the chat line? Was that it for now?
Yes, Jeff Wick said, Arnie, we still have it, and we'll be back out next year.
Oh.
And Don Tyree Francis says, thanks. I'm an engineer, so the explanation is appreciated. I always admired the Motown missile cars, and thanks for the show.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, this is it. It's taking me a while, but then the light goes on, and I'm like, okay, now I get it. Fantastic. Well,
yeah,
my
Jim
goodness.
Cummings, let's see, man. Jim Cummings just said, he said, my first front motor car had a big block Mopar in it.
Okay.
Yeah, so you did good there, Jim. And we're pretty much caught up on the chat. People are just saying hi. And Jeff Wick said he's out now. So we're caught up.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for joining, everybody.
Okay, well, if I can make a comment, I'm going to pitch a little bit here. John Yost has the license for all the Mopar missile stuff on the wire car for T-shirts and Chotsky kind of stuff in that. So if you guys are looking to collect anything, go to John Yost and his desktop muscle car.
Got it. Yeah, that we would definitely want to say, where can folks find you? Do you guys have things to sell or services that you offer that you have time to do for other folks?
Well, like I said, a lot of it is with John and desktop muscle cars. This car behind me, that's sitting there on the bench, this one, you can see it.
Yeah.
That you get through us directly or through me. A company made the injection molded bodies on this, and so then you can buy the bodies yourself and put them on your own remote control cars, or you can get them from me, or I'll build you a whole car, remote control car.
Well, where can folks find you for that?
Right at the moment, our website's down for a variety of reasons, the least of which is I'm not smart enough to figure out how to put it back up. But it's not quite that bad, but it's close. But we're going to be back up here in another couple of weeks again, and it's just going to be Motown Missile Mopar Missile Racing Inc.com.
Okay. Mopar Missile Racing Inc.com. Gotcha.
Yeah, that'll be it.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much for visiting with us tonight. Let's see what else we got. So, man, I mean, we pretty much covered it all. And I think I sometimes ask for interests away from racing. Do you do anything when you're not working on the cars or showing them?
Yeah, more than my wife appreciates. I love flying. Okay. Matter of fact, truth be known, is I got my pilot's license before I got my driver's license. On the day of my birthday, I soloed and got my student pilot's license. And so I've still kept in that. Matter of fact, I'm looking to buy a plane here, and because our grandchildren all live in California, and I'm tired of driving the 15 freeway, and so it'd be easier to fly over there again.
Right.
And I used to have a couple planes that I putz around with, and so I do that. But I'm a pastor, ordained pastor, as well as a businessman, and I've done this for decades. I have a company called Blue Fire Renewables, and I do what's called marketplace ministry. So, we're a technology again driven company, all for green energy and cleaning the environment and that. We have our own patents on technology and that. And so I'll go into meetings and you can go on our website. It's basically BFREINC, BeFreeInc.com. And if you click on that link and you going through the landing page in that, you're going to find something called Real Power. And Real Power basically is a ministry website for people to, see that's what we offer also.
Awesome.
And so over the years, I've traveled worldwide, and I have, and particularly in the Asian nations, they absolutely tear everything apart. They read everything that's written and all that. And I would go into meetings, like particularly in China and in Malaysia. And at the very end of the meetings, they'd always be quiet, but there was always one designated person that goes, Mr. Klann or Klann's son, if I was in Japan. We don't understand this real power. What is real power? And it became the best evangelical witnessing tool in the world. And I tell them, about Jesus. I tell them about, who we are and why we were created as human beings and what our purpose here is on earth. And you can know you can know God intimately. And many of them go, because they have to, particularly in Asia, you got a hive mindset. But I also would say, like if you're having problems with your marriage, or if you're having problems with your life in general, or maybe you're drinking too much or whatever, I said, let's talk afterwards, and I can maybe help you, and I can give you some Bible verses in there. So I've always done this as a ministry. Well, my wife that I have is also not a pastor in a classical sense, but she's part of a ministry called Healing Rooms, which I'm participatory in also. And she's director of Healing Rooms over all of Latin America. And so I go with her a lot when I have spare time to do trainings in various Latin America countries, like Guatemala, Colombia, Mexico. She's down in Argentina right now. She's coming back in 2 days. And so we're heavily involved in ministry, but we don't force on anybody. If you're interested, fine. I open it up. But I can tell you that over the years, I had the number 3 man in China. We were having a big meeting in China, in Beijing, and at the end, after the meeting was over, he came up to me and he said, "I'd like to know more." Well, he gave his life to Christ. Okay, and so it spans many. Mostly, we deal with engineers, marketing people, and that. But also, when it gets into licensing technology, which is primarily what we do, that becomes, particularly in a centralized government like China has, that becomes every political in the whole world that's in China as part of that meeting. And right. And so you have a pretty far reach. The ambassador from China, this was several decades ago, he came to Christ on the same basis. So it's they have an underground church. People don't realize this, but China is the largest Christian nation in the world.
I can imagine.
They have more Christian
on the numbers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a numbers game. They have over 300 million believers in China. It's bigger than the United States in believers. So.
Yeah, we have just about that many folks all together, don't we?
Yeah, I think like 320 or 330 now. I don't remember. Yeah, but anyway, but that's what I do on the side, in my spare time.
Thank you. John, did you have a thought, sir?
What was that, BP?
All right, did you have a comment?
Man, I just want to say this has been a fantastic interview. And, We have 2 weeks off coming up, and I'm gonna come back and watch this again and again because you were just wonderful, Arnie. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Arnie, thank you so much for coming on. Any final words? I think you're giving us so much inspiration and so much technical inspiration, and of course, life inspiration as well. Any final thoughts before we say farewell?
Well, if you have me again in maybe about 6 months or so, I'm going to have a whole bunch more information to share with everybody.
Okay.
Particularly what we're going to be doing with the neon and doing these engines and all that kind of stuff. But I want to leave you with a final thought, and that is, this is now I got to talk to my main sponsor, Jesus. We're living in a period of time right now that the Bible speaks of more than any other time in the whole world's history. And in Ezekiel chapters 37 and 38, those prophecies in those two chapters particularly are coming alive and happening as we speak. In 37, it talks about the valley of dry bones, and the angel asks Ezekiel, "Can these bones live?" And he says, "Only you know, Lord." And that he was talking about Israel being a dead nation. It had been spread, around the world and dismantled, and Israel didn't exist at all. And yet in 1948, May 14th, 1948, that prophecy happened in one day. Those bones came alive and Israel was reformed as a nation. And that started a countdown clock for all of us. And there's many prophecies in not only Ezekiel, but in Daniel, in the minor prophets like Joel, in Revelations. I mean, all of us know about Revelations and the woes and the judgments that are coming in that. Well, all of that's ahead here. It's really happening now. And if there's ever a time people need to get right with God, now's the time to do it. Because only he knows what his timing is. But I can tell you, based on just what is happening in Israel, what has been prophesied, and there's a whole lot of stuff that takes hours to explain. But there is a clock that's ticking down, and it's a 6,000-year clock. Okay, and we're at 50. If you look at the Jewish calendar, is 57, 85, I think this year. But in actual fact, they know that there's about 200 years missing, and so really we're at 59, 85 or so, and so we got about 15 more years before the 6,000-year number comes up. And again, it's too long to explain that tonight, but I truly believe personally in my heart of hearts, and I hear from God a lot. Okay, truthfully, I pray a lot. I spend a lot of time with the Lord, and I know that his thing is he keeps telling me, get ready, get ready, get ready. Be right, be like the five virgins that were smart when I don't know if you know the parable, but it was 10 women that were waiting for the bridegroom to come to marry him, and the bridegroom was delayed, and so 5 of the virgins had their lamps trimmed and had extra oil, and the other 5 didn't. And so as the bridegroom was delayed, which is representative of Jesus, and the virgins were representative of his church, us, that are believers. There were many that had fallen asleep, and so all of a sudden the announcement comes out that the bridegroom is coming, and the 5 women that had the oil for their lamps to trim them were able to get into the wedding feast, and 5 that weren't smart enough to get extra oil didn't get to go in. And that's going to happen to us. We might all be believers and have Jesus as our Lord and Savior, but if we don't have a spirit in us and communicating and having that personal relationship with Jesus and with the Father, many people are thinking they're saved, but they're not. Matthew 7 and verse 13 says that at the time of the judgment coming up, which is coming upon us, when Jesus returns, people are going to say, we prophesied in your name, we healed people in your name, we cast out demons in your name, we did everything you wanted us to do, and Jesus says, get away from me, I never knew you. And if that doesn't shake you to the core, then you don't understand what that means, because this is a situation where Jesus is saying, I want a relationship with you. The Father in heaven is saying, I want a relationship with you. I don't need you to be religious. I need you to love me. And I love you. And I provide for you. But if you're just going to say, well, I know Jesus, you know of him, but you don't know him, you're not going to go. Okay, and that's pretty cruel what I just said, but that's the truth. That's what the Bible says. And so I just encourage everyone who's listening tonight, get right with the Lord. You know, cry out to the Holy Spirit, come in to me, teach me, be my, because Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to come to teach us about all things, and he will talk to us. So I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you. Arnie Klann, everyone. You know, giving us inspiration from many angles tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure.
And, well, it's my pleasure also. Pleasure meeting you and John, and hopefully people come away a little bit smarter.
Absolutely, I think in many ways. And we'll definitely look forward to talking to you in 6 months. We'll make Miss Kay put that on our calendar, and we'll get something going.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you, Kay, for coordinating this. I really appreciate it.
She's a terrific producer, and she's just knocking it out of the park.
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, Arnie Klann, from Paynesville, Ohio to Las Vegas and all points in between, making Mopar Pro Stock happen for us. Thank you, sir. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, that was fantastic. So, wow, amazing stuff. John, let's go to you, sir. It's time for JB's Take and the Racer of the Week. We spent a little extra time tonight, but well worth it, adding a half hour to the show, and I wouldn't have missed a second of it. John, take it away, sir.
Thanks, BP. My pick for Racer of the Week is Jim Cummings from Somerville, New Jersey. Jim is the creator of the East Coast Fuelers, a group of front-engine dragsters and blown fuel altereds with 18 members. I'm proud to feature Jim and his fine dragster he named Seconds of Pleasure in my segment tonight. I'm wearing my purple Draglist shirt tonight in honor of this gorgeous car. And BP Jim Cummings said, we missed you at MIR this weekend. I had to work. I would have given Ray Urban a run and a T-shirt. Jim grew up in Baldwin, Long Island, Motion. His first taste of nitro was in 1968 at New York National Raceway. He raced at West Hampton until moving to New Jersey. His current ride is a 1970 Ed Mabry 180-inch front-engine dragster. It was Paul Smith's 1973 Comp Eliminator champion car. Jim created the East Coast Fuelers to showcase these cars, and he represents an awesome group of teams running up and down the East Coast. This group puts on a fantastic show, and they have stayed booked into all the tracks up there. His car is an A-fuel dragster. His best ET to date is a 718 at 189 miles an hour. He's trying to be the first small block of the group to be in the sixes, and I have no doubt that he will get there soon. Jim sends a big thanks to Mike Chilando from Alki Digger, and most importantly, Jim thanks his wife for her support with his racing. Now, Jim is going to be our guest interview on the September show, and tonight I'm just giving you all the basics of this great racer. Stay tuned for his guest feature. Jim and your group, we wish you good luck, safe racing, and the best of times in the future. Now, I've been getting some pretty perplexing issues with Facebook. They've been threatening me to activate their two-factor authentication by August the 30th, or they say they're going to lock me out until I activate it. Well, 99% of my friends have told me it's a scam, and I'm inclined to believe them for a number of reasons, mainly because it's supposed to be a voluntary option. They also assigned a business account to my page and set up a payment schedule. Well, I replied to them that my page is not now, nor has it ever been a business page, and I'm not making any money off of the graphics I post for Draglist Live. For either of these issues, after sending 5 messages to Facebook, I have received no reply. So I figure no news is good news. But if I do get locked out on August 30th, I want everybody to know that this has been the joy of my life, and I have appreciated being a part of this show more than words can say. Regarding the data breach, I've checked my credit and my bank account, and everything's cool. I tried to get a credit check with the big three credit bureaus, and every one of them requires me to have a mobile phone number. Well, see, I got rid of my cell phone 6 months ago because I never used it and I was spending money for nothing. Now I'm required to have one just so I can receive a text from them giving me a one-time code. I haven't decided yet whether or not to go along with that. I'm doing fairly well with modern technology, but I'm still an old school, grumpy old bastard. I have a friend who is stressing me to do it, but I checked my credit card and it hasn't been used for any fraudulent purpose. So for Facebook's two-factor authentication and my credit standing, I'm in a holding pattern. I have this unbearable feeling that everything is going to work out great. Everybody stay safe and well. You are the most important part of this show, and we love you all. We look forward to having you all with us every week. It's a great way for us to spend an hour together on a Monday night. Now, see y'all next time. Enjoy the U.S. Nationals. God bless America. Back to you, BP.
Thank you, John. And I have to say that Facebook has been giving me a little trouble today too, just after, weeks and weeks, maybe a month or two, where they used to send me daily updates saying that we're removing this photo because it doesn't meet our guidelines, which is just whatever photo I put up with the post. Those started popping up again today. So who knows? Maybe they've gone into some special place. One thing I would recommend is maybe if you check them and see if they'll send you an email with a code instead, because that's a common way of doing it as well. Most two-factor authentication give you the option. So
that'd be
might
great.
be a spam. You never know. Anyway, but best of luck to you with that. And let's move on here. And while Facebook still lets us, that's why we went to YouTube. So we got tired of Facebook's shenanigans.
Yeah.
But had a great time at Funny Car Chaos down at Maryland International Raceway this last week, man. A lot of our friends, I think almost every winner was a former guest. I mean, we had, Joe Perrone won with the Rocky Perrone's car. John and Patty Sergio won. And Ray Urban won, and let's see, who else. I don't have it in front of me now, so I'm going to be leaving a few folks out. But we had a wonderful, wonderful time visiting with all our friends. Jack Red went down with me, and so we spent the day just meeting and greeting and having a great time. I want to congratulate David Gates, who set a new personal best lapse time in his jet dragster. He had about half of Southern Maryland down there visiting with him. And of course, we were keeping Kay up to date with everything that he was doing. And so really, and Mr. Aldridge, Larry Aldridge, who owns the car, he got in it for a run and ran his best ever time in the car. So just a wonderful weekend of meeting and greeting with folks. And hello again to everybody. Thanks to Patty and John Sergio for being so kind and giving us all a home away from home in the pits and feeding half the Funny Car pits at the same, myself included. And thanks to John and Patty also for pulling me into the winner circle photo, which I did not deserve but mightily appreciate. So it was really, really an awesome weekend. So let's talk about upcoming guests. Now, Miss K has been working overtime, and we have a full September, folks. So John's mentioned one, and John, I'll get with you after this to start setting up posters and whatnot. But we are off for Labor Day on September 2nd, so we hope you all have a great day and enjoy the Indy Nationals, the 70th annual. On September 9th, we've been talking about it a little bit. It's locked in, thanks to Miss K. Top Fuel legend Corey McClanathan. Corey Mack will be joining us on September 9th. So right after we get off of the Indy break, we'll have Corey Mack with us. September 16th, I just mentioned them, John and Patty Sergio, the Warpath Buick Somerset Regal, and some of the most fun people you ever want to meet will be joining us live. Just like Jim Cummings tonight, John did a Racer of the Week on them just a couple of weeks ago, and they are coming on live, so it's going to be a lot of fun. And then September 23rd, as John just noted, Jim Cummings is coming on. The East Coast Dragster Association. We'll get the actual name. He's got dragsters, he's got ultras, he's got everything. Saw many of those racers over the weekend, always putting on a great show. So Jim Cummings will be joining us on the 23rd. And then September 30th, rounding out the month, Scott Arija, but everybody else knows him as Scott Arriaga, the famous jet dragster driver, second generation jet car racer. His dad also raced funny cars and pro stocks and everything else. But Scott Arriaga, who also is the tuner with our buddy Don Perdue, who has been on the show with the Wicked Sensation car. So Scott is going to be joining us to tell us all about jets and everything else, and tuning them and getting them ready. So a big September coming up, and lots of other names coming up for October. I spoke with Gary Pritchett, formerly Little Bear. Now he's Big Bear. He's doing a great job. By the way, Gary Pritchett had a wonderful event as well, driving the Bunny and the Boys car, and lots of other big names coming up. So we'll fill up the October time frame and the December time frame as well. But September coming up, Corey Mack, John and Patty Sergio, Jim Cummings, and Scott Arriaga to round out September. Thank you, Miss Kay. Let's go on into our saddest part. And we have been off for a couple of weeks, so it's quite a long list. But this is those we lost. John just shared this with me today. Is it Dwayne Lote? I'm not exactly sure how to say Dwayne's last name, but he ran the Quad Cities Facebook group, and he kept us informed of lost friends from the middle of the country. And now we honor him with a similar remembrance. Condolences to his son, Sean, and the rest of the family. So Dwayne, one of the partner Facebook groups, and we've got about 25 ourselves, but many others have asked us or have offered us to share Draglist Live promotions with them. The Quad Cities group was one of them. Jeff Elliker and all the groups he runs, very similar. So really a wonderful guy. John, who's, you talked with him about every week. So farewell to Dwayne.
Yes, he was a wonderful guy, and he kept us well informed, and he ran a great Facebook page with the Quad Cities Drag Racers. He was an excellent admin on that page, and I know that he had a history in our sport as well as a racer, and and everybody that knew the guy loved him. He was just a terrific person. So rest in peace, Dwayne.
Thank you, John, and my condolences to you. I know you guys were pretty close, at least online pals. But these days it's we're blessed to have so many friends across the country. It's amazing. On the 5th, also Bill Krutz. He was once the owner of the American Service Station, but he died, or he ran a '56 Volkswagen Beetle in modified for a short time in the '70s. So thanks to Bill. I believe he was 80 years old. I think Bill was he lived a full life. And farewell to you, sir. And this comes not from Rhonda Hartman Smith and John Bodie Smith. On the 11th, their family was heartbroken to hear the news that Frank Alviso has passed. And they say some of their greatest memories in racing involve Frank. They'll miss him dearly, but treasure all the good times and laughs and forever remember him in their hearts. So farewell to Frank Alviso on the 11th. Also on the 13th, this hit the world news, of course, but world champion bracket racer Scotty Richardson, the man who did just about everything in ET racing in the National Hot Rod Association and other organizations, passing away on the 13th. I want to say we've had Scotty as a guest on our show. We've had one of the Richardsons on. We've been up for 12 years, and I frankly forget all the amazing names we've had on the show. At one point, Bud and Mr. Drag News DeBoer created me a list, but of course, he's been gone a few years, so I think I'd better create a list of all of them just to remember who we've had. And also, just an aside, I want to get all of those shows eventually right here on this Facebook platform. I'm sorry, this YouTube platform, so they're easy to find. Also on the 13th, Larry Ofria of Valley Head Service, very famous drag racer and obviously, performance engineering support person. Valley Head Service, very popular in Southern California. He passed after a lengthy illness. So farewell to his family and many friends. That comes from Joel Grusin, the great altered drag racer. On the 14th, Pro Stock racer Paul Pittman passed away. Paul has been out there racing, against the big guys here in the NHRA for the last couple of years. Really great looking, well turned out cars, but farewell to Paul. And on the 19th, this comes from Don Moyer, our partner who runs the Gasser Madness website that we formerly temporarily managed, and he's been on the show as well. He says that Chuck Sonny was the nickname. Charles Bonnick passed away. Chuck was the creator of Don's Rebel Reaper Gasser that he races right now. He made a body mold off an old steel coupe in his backyard shop and made the body that became the Rebel Reaper, which Don races to this day. He also built the frame and roll cage in the car. And Don said he learned many things from this very talented man, one of a kind for sure. So farewell to Chuck Sonny, Charles Bonnick, who passed away on the 19th, a Cleveland native like myself. Also on the 15th, farewell to Charlie Berner, super stock Chevelle racer. We hear this from the Drag Racing Stars, RIP Drag Racing Stars site on Facebook. Thanks to them for always taking care of folks. On the 23rd, moving closer here, Steve Montrelli passed away. Steve Montrelli, a wonderful guy, one of Kay Turkelson's personal friends, worked on the Hellfire Corvette that she's associated with. Also, if you go way, way back to the 70s, Steve Montrelli, the tuner on those famous Mickey Thompson Grand Am funny cars that were so competitive on the National Hot Rod Association circuit and elsewhere. Steve Montrelli also, much like Keith Black, much like Ed Pink, had his own motor. Much like Joe Paisano, for instance, there was a Montrelli Hemi that was very, very popular and very competitive and big, I think 540 inches worth. It was a monster car, a monster cubic inch size. But those things powered those Grand Ams, and they were, of course, some of the quickest cars in the sport. So Steve Montrelli, a lot of love being shared up online today from a lot of the Southern California and the fuel racing fans and racers. So farewell to Steve. And then, I hope I'm not doing this right. I've read this name for years. I've never heard the name said. So Alex Zydias, or Zydias, Xydias. Alex deserves to have his name said correctly. If anybody out there in the chat knows, let me know, and I'll try to correct it here tonight while we're doing it. He was 102 years old. Alex was a hot rodding icon. He was a founder of SoCal Speed Shop, that famous speed shop that goes way back to the lake beds. Most known for land speed racing, many other accomplishments. Unbelievable. Born in 1922, and by the 1940s was captivated by the lure of hot rodding. There we go. Oh, X-Hideous. That's how you say it. Thank you. So the couple, we actually had a little bit of help with that. But he returned from service and promptly founded SoCal Speed Shop in Burbank, California. Quickly gained notoriety for building the first 200-mile hot rod, 200-mile-an-hour hot rod on the Bonneville Salt Flats. A very, very heavy influence in the early days of organized drag racing. So, sir, 102 years old. Bless you for all your contributions. Alex X-Hideous passing away on the 24th. And that's, man, let me have half the impact and let me live half that number of years, from where I am right now. Just amazing, gentlemen. John, any thoughts from you on any of these remembrances or on the show itself?
Man, that's a lot of them. There's no doubt. And it's like Jim Cummings just said, there's more days behind us than there are in front of us.
Yes,
And
sir.
I'd say make every day count for the best you can. I'm going to a funeral Friday for my oldest first cousin, Wayne Bird in Galveston.
Sorry,
And
John.
I looked up to him all my life. He was a great person. And he's about the same age as Pee Wee Bowen was and Billy Bunch. And these guys were all iconic personalities in my world, that I grew up with. So, and Dwayne Lowett was just such a great guy. I hate to lose him, but man, it's something that we're all going to have to deal with eventually. And now we've got the U.S. Nationals coming up this weekend. It's the big go, man. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm really going to enjoy it, and I hope everybody else does.
Heck yeah, the big 70. And a lot of folks I was talking to this weekend are heading out. And they said, Bill, you coming? And I'm like, well, no, can't. But, one of these days I'll determine that I'm really retired and actually do some of those things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I made the 50th. So we'll be, I think I made the 60th too, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll catch,
Right.
How about the 75th? We'll go for that one. Anyway,
I'll be at I'll try to make it to the 75th.
There you go.
I'm going to Dallas in October for the Fall Nationals, and I'm taking my drummer Scott with me, and he's
Awesome.
never been to a drag race, so it's going to knock his socks off.
Oh yeah, he'll be amazed. All right, thanks, John. So cool. So let's do a wrap, folks. I want to thank Arnie Klann. It was just amazing. We went time and again, time and a half on that, and just walking us through this. So that technological history, I love the tech shows like that. And you let us know what you think, guys, and we will see if we can do some more of those. Of course, John Bachman, my brother, thank you, man. Kay Turkelson, who's just adorable and taking such good care of us here, and takes care of everybody she knows wherever she goes. Rob McCabe, thank you, brother, for keeping the drag lists updated, and for that matter, Mel Bashore for doing like the early 50s. He's rewriting the front end of the drag list while Rob brings us up to speed and on the latest. And by the way, I have to say that Rob has completed filling in the National Hot Rod Association times for all the pro classes where Danny White had stopped when he passed away. It was an NHRA race he had just put in, and then we had the rest of the year, and I just frankly couldn't get around to it. And Rob has come in and filled in all of 23, up to date on FY20 or 24, and he's actually using Danny's format, and it's just a giant service to us. So I want to thank Rob for doing that for us. And of course, thanks forever to Danny White, my brother, who was with us since 1990 and always in our hearts. And thank you to Johnny B, JB, making things happen for us every single week. Folks, I want to thank Jeff Gilder, Zeus Digital Marketing, Racers Reunion, and Wingding TV for getting us started way back. Man, we're almost coming up on 15 years, guys. 14 years ago now, we've been doing the show. Click the like and click the share to let your friends know, even if you're watching the recording. And also, please subscribe to the Draglist channel right here on YouTube. And please check in on draglist.com daily to see what's new. Plus, at the bottom of every page is tons and tons and tons of Facebook groups you can join. Those things are exploding, man. Those things are exploding. And I'm getting probably 50 new members, 50 to 60, maybe 100 sometimes, new members across every one of those groups. That's pretty amazing. Anyway, thanks so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful Labor Day. Enjoy Indy, and please join us on September 9th for Top Fuel legend Corey McClanathan, the famous Corey Mack. Folks, it's been my pleasure to hang out with you tonight. John, have a great week, my friend, and everyone.